Welcome to DOT Compliance Group, Section 3 Training, Services provided to the trucking industry. Part 2, over Unified Carrier Registration. In this part of your training, we'll review what the Unified Carrier Registration is and its purpose, who pays it, how to determine the cost for each carrier, when the filing date's determined, and how to understand IRP, IFTA, and how it relates to UCR. So let's get started. What is the Unified Carrier Registration and its purpose? Created by Congress, the Unified Carrier Registration Act of 2005, located at 49 of the U.S. Code, subsection 14504A, requires motor carriers involved in interstate commerce and other businesses subject to the Act to submit annual fees based on fleet size to submit funding for highway motor carrier registration and safety programs. It was created to help govern the collection and redistribution of UCR fees back to the individual states. It replaces the former system for registering known as the Single State Registration System, or SSRS. It's considered a revenue generator for the states, the same as fines or civil penalties, and is used for funding various programs that improve the safety of the trucking industry, such as driver education programs, safety awareness programs, commercial vehicle enforcement activities such as audits and roadside checks, and a multitude of other activities that provide continued safety on highways throughout the United States. A simple way to consider it is a federal tax for crossing state lines. Who needs UCR? Every commercial motor carrier who crosses state lines at least one day out of the year for interstate commerce and that exceeds 10,000 pounds must pay the UCR fees. As defined under Section 49 of the U.S. Code, subsection 311.01, commercial motor vehicle means a self-propelled vehicle used on highways in commerce, principally if the vehicle meets the following criteria: has a gross vehicle weight rating or gross vehicle weight of at least 10,001 pounds, whichever is greater. Note that, whichever is greater, which means that trailing equipment or trailers should be taken into consideration for UCR purposes. Passenger vehicles designed to transport passengers of 10 or more, or 9 plus 1, which means 9 plus the driver. Brokers, freight forwarders, leasing agents, farmers, vehicles with hazmat placarding that are used in transporting material found by the Secretary of Transportation to be hazardous under Section 49 of the U.S. Code, subsection 5103, and transported in a quantity requiring placarding under regulations prescribed by the U.S. Transportation Secretary. UCR fees for the UCR registrants that operate vehicles, that is, motor carriers and freight forwarders, are based on a bracket system in which the UCR fees depend on the number of vehicles in which the registrant operates. Registrants that do not operate vehicles, such as brokers or leasing companies, pay fees at the lowest bracket level of 0 to 2, or 0 to 2 power units. Since they have no trucks or no power units, they're in the 0 category. The brackets or categories for which fees are charged are for the following fleet sizes that you'll see commonly on a daily basis: 0 to 2 power units, 3 to 5, 6 to 20, 21 to 100, and then jumping up in tiers 5 and 6, 101 to 1,000, and 1,001 plus. The fees charged for the UCR program are uniform across all participating states and are set by the U.S. Secretary of Transportation based on the recommendation of the UCR board, which means that they'll be consistent. You won't see any variation from changes from state to state. What happens if I don't pay? What happens if I don't pay UCR? Each UCR participating state is free under the program to impose whatever penalties it sees fit for non-compliance with the requirements of the program, and many of those are significant. That check can be carried out during an audit, which often includes roadside traffic stops or checkpoints such as weigh stations. Your DOT number can and usually will be put out of service eventually, along with other applicable enforcement penalties at the time of the audit. Common examples for different types of carriers. Conditions to be excluded from the UCR count. Here are a few examples that you'll see in some unique scenarios that you'll come across on a regular basis that you need to be familiar with. Agricultural haulers and farm vehicles. Ag haulers operating in interstate commerce, including those operating under special plates, such as IRP or IFTA, are subject to UCR, even though they may be exempt from other registration or specific safety requirements, such as their vehicles. This includes farm vehicles that qualify as commercial motor vehicles. It might be noted that movements of agricultural produce by a truck, railhead, ocean, or river port are almost certainly interstate in nature. An exempt carrier, that is, one that hauls agriculture and other commodities exempt from federal operating authority requirements, is required to register for UCR. The Act specifically includes exempt carriers within the purview of the program. An excerpt from page 9 of the 2020 UCR handbook states this: it should be noted that a private carriers of passengers are not included in the categories subject to UCR. Passenger vehicles, business and non-business. Passenger vehicles not charging a fee, but are an ancillary service to the company's main business would not pay UCR. Private passenger carriers is a category defined somewhat narrowly. It does not include commercial entities such as hotels who provide shuttle service for the customers and ancillary to their primary business. Nor would it include a children's camp or church camp that provides a shuttle service to and from the camp for the children, where might there be no separate charge. But where the camp recovers the cost through the overall fees of the camp, such operations are considered to be for hire transportation. On the other hand, a business that solely carries its own employees with direct or indirect charge to them is not considered a for hire carrier by virtue of a service. There is one other accepted group. The Act exempts from UCR all motor carriers that operate solely within Hawaii, except those involved in moving household goods and for individual shippers. The Act also provides that the UCR board may exempt any other category of motor carrier, but that the board has not done so at this time. As a general rule, all transportation operations involved in interstate commerce that are required to register with FMCSA and obtain a USDOT number, effective February 13th from the 2020 UCR handbook. Other common examples for different types of carriers that you'll see are international ports, carriers doing commerce at an international port that are not exempt from paying UCR. Common examples you will see are in states such as Florida, Washington, and California. So be prepared to respond when they tell you that they're intrastate only. They can be an intrastate only carrier, but they go to and from an international port. So be sure and be aware of that. We'll discuss this further in the sales portion of the training. Charities and nonprofits are not exempt from registering for UCR if their transportation operations are in interstate commerce. Short-term and seasonal operations, a seasonal transportation operation, provided it operates in the interstate commerce, will be required to register for UCR, even though it may be idle much of the year. An example of this would be Christmas tree farms. A business is not exempt from the requirements of the UCR program merely because its operations are restricted to states that do not participate in UCR. There are 41 current states who participate in the UCR program. 9 states do not participate. Those states are Arizona, Maryland, Oregon, Florida, Nevada, Vermont, Hawaii, New Jersey, Wyoming, and the District of Columbia. However, that does not mean that they do not pay UCR. So when a carrier calls in from the state of Florida, for example, and goes and travels across state lines, once you see their DOT record, they are still required to pay UCR if they travel into Alabama or Georgia. Any state surrounding Wyoming, if they're crossing state lines out of Wyoming, is a very good example. They're required to pay UCR. Another example is Nevada going to Arizona. Both of these are non-paying states. I've only came across one example in the past few years of where a carrier goes specifically from, let's say, for example, Las Vegas or Laughlin, Nevada, into the Bullhead City, Arizona, or any location in Arizona, such as Phoenix. Most of the time, they're going to be crossing into the state of California, Utah, or one of the other states. If they did cross into Oregon, that would be another example of a carrier that may not pay UCR, but you want to establish that and make sure that that criteria is correct, that they do not travel to any other states at any other time of the year. Here are good reminders for UCR. Remember that an interstate carrier crosses state lines and it enters into another state. An intrastate carrier does not cross state lines. One of the most important questions that you'll need to learn is, are you over 26,000 pounds and crossing state lines for interstate commerce at least one day out of the year? This is a good qualifying question that I ask almost all carriers. Here's a page from the Safer website. This is a public website that everyone in the public has access to, and this is in regards to 49 of the U.S. Section 49 of the U.S. Code, subsection 14504A. Thanks for being a part of the team. You've completed today's training of Unified Carrier Registration Part 2.